After more than 2 hellish decades married to a narcissist who physically, mentally, and verbally abused her and her 3 boys, Bailey Smith is standing up and speaking out to bring an end to these nightmares. She is the author of Married to an Illusion, a survivor's guide to recognizing and escaping narcissistic abuse. In this book, you will learn the dire consequences of loving a narcissist and how dangerous it can be to not know they exist and not recognize when you are being abused by one. Bailey Smith is also an advocate and educator through her podcast, The Never Give Up Show. Bailey, welcome to Triumph Talks. It's really good to see you again.
Melanie, it's so good to be back with you. I always enjoy this dynamic between the two of us, and I missed it. So I'm glad to be back.
We spent a lot of time together during the
Yeah.
writing process of your book and
We did.
getting it published, and it's been out for a little while now. It's been very successful. It was a #1 new release and a #1 bestseller. So you have been through a lot. And really, when we go through hard things, the best thing we can do is use it to help others, and definitely helps us to heal. And I see you are just so bright and energetic, and I know that you are making a real difference in people's lives. I'd love to ask you the first question, which is simply, what inspired you to write this book?
So Melanie, when we go through things in life, difficult things, sometimes we have to make meaning of those difficult, hard times. And that was the real inspiration. I had a story and I needed to share it. I finally had a voice. I had knowledge. I had a little bit of education. I needed to get what I had been through out there. You helped that happen.
Yeah, it's a good sized book. I think 330 pages of incredible knowledge and teaching, learning all about what narcissism is and how to recognize it. So let's jump into the next question. And that is, what do you hope that people will take from reading your book?
I was married over 2 decades. I had no idea. I got married young in the 90s. I had no idea what abuse was. I don't think people knew what narcissistic abuse was or NPD was. I had absolutely no idea I was an abused woman for over 2 decades. I always chalked up what I went through, what I was dealing with was somebody with major anger issues. When I finally came to my separation and started learning, meeting other women and listening to their stories, boom, light bulb went on. And
you went through a lot of abuse, though, before that light bulb finally went on.
When you finally are able to see, like a mirror, you see yourself in other people, and it puts a name, it puts meaning, it puts everything, education to what you lived through. If you become validated, that was huge for me. And I lived for so many years in a bubble, and there are so many people still living in that bubble.
Not a good one. Sometimes we talk about living in a bubble as sort of like you're protected, but the truth is the bubble was holding you into something so toxic.
It was horrible.
And you were so manipulated that you had no ability to see what was really going on until you were able to get out of it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that you talked about it was actually in a support group as you listened to the other abused women, thinking that you weren't. That you started.
That's right. At that point, my goal for going to that group therapy was to learn, to get educated. But I also remembered saying, my abuser's going to get better. My abuser's going to change. And a year and a half later, walking out of there, I said, no, it's not. He's not. And they can't. It's very, very dangerous. Narcissism is very dangerous. To this day, even after I've been out there advocating, worked on my show, met so many people of all walks of life, it's still under an underspoken about pandemic. You're in an extremely dangerous situation because so many women end up gone, or their children end up gone.
Well, and that's what's so important about your book, is that it's not something that's well known. It's coming closer to that, a little bit by little bit. I have your book here on my shelf. I'm actually going to reach over and grab it. It's full of sound bites and just incredible quotables and information that people need. But I'm just going to share some of them as a way of introducing just some of what you have to teach. And then as I read them, I'd love for you to add more or talk about it a little bit as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the book.
Okay.
And grab my glasses. So the first one that I want to read actually just comes from your introduction, because I think it's really a wonderful explanation of your book and of the problem that you are addressing. It says, "This book is written to help those currently caught in a narcissist trap and battling to get out, and is also meant to be an essential preventative resource. As someone who was once lost in this haunted forest and who is now forcefully fighting her way out, I am sharing my stories in order to teach you to spot narcissists before they seduce you into their snare, a place from which you will not get out unscathed. It is my hope that this book will be shared with young men and women entering courtship age. No one should be naive to the reality of narcissist personality disorder. Reading this book will assist you to avoid destruction, pain, and torture."
And also, a very important point is the cycle of abuse. You know, every kind of abuse out there, if it's not dealt with at a young enough age, it's going to repeat. And we see it, right?
Yes.
You know, every abused, unhealed trauma is a wound within us. And it goes back to very unhealthy attachments. And those unhealthy attachments, if they are never reversed and created into healthy attachments, you are going to do that to your children. And I see it within my own immediate family. It's really sad, because it's just the next generation, the next generation.
Well, and I think what's so important too, and what you're pointing out here, is that if this book can be given to youth while they're courting, instead of later to say, "Oh crap, you're in a bad situation, you know, here's what you're dealing with," but to help them recognize it, I think we can go a long way to stopping this cycle. Because instead of having these relationships happen, if we can help them to recognize, and it is very hard to recognize them because they are such amazing manipulators, which we'll talk about next. I also want to point out that your book is organized in a really great way. You have 4 sections. The first one is titled Understanding Narcissism, and you have 11 chapters that really explain what narcissism is. The second section is titled The Effects of Narcissism, and this is what happens to you because of it, because sometimes you just don't even recognize how much you are responding to that narcissist. Section 3 is how to get away from a narcissist, because it's not as easy as we'd like to think. And section 4 is how the system is letting us down. So I really love how you did that, Bailey. I think that's such a great way of helping the readers know what it is that you're teaching.
What I want people to know that have not read the book, or maybe read or skimmed it, this was not a book. It wasn't a payback book. It wasn't a get back at you book, which is why I don't use names except for my own name and then the people that contributed. This was a book that I really, really wanted to teach people, while teaching them and educating them in the knowledge that I had accumulated, and with Melanie's help. I wanted also people to feel what I went through, feel my pain, feel my children's pain, see the hell that it is, the war zone that we're living in. And which is why I put a lot of things in there, such as pictures or, you know, real things, emails or police reports in there, so that people could really see this is real. This is not made up. This was my story. What I went through, what my children went through, and to educate those out there, because I know I've met so many people that have gone through or are going through what I went through. And the system hasn't changed. The systems have not changed. It's very frustrating. And if we don't bring awareness, get this out there to those that don't know what NPD is, narcissistic personality disorder, again, the trauma doesn't go away. We don't get healed. The wound within us will never get healed.
So let's dive a little bit into some of the teachings. I would like to read another excerpt. It's not hyperbole to say that falling in love with a narcissist is the easiest thing in the world to do. That is by design.
Mm-hmm.
Narcissists are masterful manipulators who employ tactics that even trained psychologists fall for. If you have already tumbled deeply and intractably in love with one, do not blame or berate yourself. They can be so enticing that without knowing ahead of time, you really don't stand a chance. That is the reason it is so important to be familiar with narcissist personality disorder and make a focused study of it.
You know, I know we joked about this, when we were writing the book and doing interviews, how I've come to a point where I can walk into a room and I spot the signs, the red flags. I say the Sixth Sense, where he
Yeah.
says, the movie where he says, I see dead people, I see narcissists, because it's a journey and we're always learning and some of them are so good. I've met so many people that say the same exact thing now, that
Mhm,
have walked my shoes.
mhm,
It's so validating because,
mhm.
you know, one of the things that people that have been abused, any kind of abuse, but especially narcissistic abuse, because you can't see it unless it's physical. And that's another thing we have to mention. But the mind control, the manipulation, the gaslighting, if people don't learn to see those signs, they're gonna end up working for a narcissist, which I did. Family court. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk about that in my book too. And I'm thankful I didn't end up going through that, but I witnessed many of those
Mhm.
situations. And I could say in the last couple of years, some of them are still in court. It's
I
horrific.
I think it's the narcissists who turn family court into the nightmare that they can be, because they're the ones that will manipulate and use the court
But
to continue to punish and torture their ex. So,
unfortunately,
yeah.
those that work with them in the court system are just as bad as they are.
Yeah,
So
and
they
the court
continue.
loves it because it's a business. But one of the things that narcissists will do at the get go. So if we're going to help somebody who's watching this show to come away with something useful, at least having a little bit of armor, right, to protect them from a narcissist, is to understand that narcissists will praise you like crazy at the beginning. So in your book, you say, while praise can be normal, healthy, and positive, do not immediately bond with anyone just because they give you compliments. And that's something easy to do. I added that. So that isn't to say you should mistrust everyone, but don't rush into the bliss of being appreciated so fast that you allow someone into your heart and life before they have proven their worthiness to be there. Spotting a narcissist is going to take time. They wear a charming mask that can be nearly impossible to recognize without more experience to see if the facade is real or fake. Talk with me, though, for a minute, based on what we just read, the actual techniques that your narcissists use that suck you in and make it so hard to recognize what you're really dealing with.
They're very charming.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're young and naive, and you don't have to be young and naive, but in my case, I was.
Right.
I was looking for that fantasy, for that soulmate. I think most of us are. We have this dream as children, as young girls, young women, of what we want in a man. When they show us a little bit of that, they suck you in. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they use every tactic. And let me tell you something: manipulation doesn't take long.
Yeah.
Mind control doesn't take long. It could be a matter of a month.
Yeah.
They can suck you in so easily. They have these narratives that they create. I mean, because I've seen this with my own children. They just can twist things. It's very scary. And again, it could be a business partner. It could be a girlfriend. It could be a boyfriend.
Yeah.
It could be a spouse. I call them terrorists. There's no
Mhm.
difference. It's a very, very, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. So one of the things you have here, and I didn't find an excerpt, but I'll just mention it as we're talking about the mask. You talk about the mask that they wear. One thing in here is something you call mirroring, which is where they get to know you. They get to know what you like. They study you, and they mirror, they reflect back to you what you want. So in essence, they become your perfect dream. And that I think that those are a couple of the things that people need to really watch for, is that if they're complimenting you a lot, we love compliments. Who doesn't love a compliment? That is something that you have in here called a red flag. And there's a number of red flags that when you see those red flags, you need to know, I like this person, but he's, or she are popping up some red flags. And of course, over complimenting, loving everything you love, just seeming so
Anything excessive, because
Mhm.
nothing is excessive in anything in life is normal.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a red flag, it could be compliments, it could be gifts, it could, if somebody has a lot of money, it could be overly gifting you. There's so many different ways, but anything that's excessive is a red flag.
And that excessiveness comes in the term love bombing.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you think the word bombing is usually not a positive word. So they're
well, I said
bombing you with love.
terrorists.
Yeah. They're bombing you with love. So you're like, how could this be a bad thing? Oh, it's a bad thing because it's a manipulation. It's not real.
It's very scary, but they will control your mind and your brain. Imagine 20 years. I had no idea I was an abused woman.
You didn't
My
even know.
my sister,
As
30
awful
years.
as it was, you didn't know. And that, I think that's really the evidence of the brain washing and the manipulation, when they can treat you so bad and you have no idea that you're being abused. It says there is a highly predictable, consistent rotation in which narcissists spin like a never-ending wash cycle when it comes to the supply in their lives. It can be broken down into 3 distinct phases: idealize, devalue, and discard. The reason this cycle is so ingrained in the life of any narcissist is that their disorder has programmed them to reject the very thing they most want: human intimacy. For them, it is a constant pull and push. They want affection but hate it at the same time. So in this is the cycle of abuse. The idealize, when you're being idealized, that's when you're being love bombed, that's when you're being complimented, the excessiveness of greatness. And then now that you're sucked in and you're in love, then they devalue. Will you talk a little bit about the devalue phase of this cycle? What does that feel like and what does that look like?
I will say in my case, during my marriage, that that my abuser needed a constant compliments. Then they reverse it. They need from you praise, constant, just worshiping them in every possible way. And you give as much as you can, but it's never enough. And that's when they seek elsewhere.
So that's the discard phase, is when they throw you off and go looking for this excitement with someone else. But between the idealize and the discard is the devalue phase. And that's where you fall from this high pedestal that they put you on. And so that's kind of what I would like to talk about, is what are the things that narcissists do to make you feel like you're being devalued, and what is the psychological effect on you when that happens?
So you're in this high, and then it reverses because you're not this special amazing, precious, I can't live without you
You can't live up to their irrational
expectations.
expectations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's nobody can. It's not human.
Right.
We all have our flaws. Nobody's perfect.
Would you just share a little more about your podcast?
So I had been on other podcasts. I started volunteering, and then I decided to start my own. And this was before the book. I was still on my healing journey, but I was fairly educated and I was in a much healthier place. And I felt I have a platform to use my voice. I'm going to open up to it to others to use their voice. So the show is a variety of different topics about never giving up. I was taking gun lessons, so I had my coach, my trainer on there. I did a lot of family court and women that were fighting for their kids shows. So it's a very big mix of shows. Even if you needed to come on to the show and use a fake name and not and if you were scared to use your real name, it's the show is just to be able to use your voice, because I know that when you go so many years without being able to use your voice because you're shushed, basically, um, how important it is. That's the reason I started the show. I did one recently. It got a lot of reviews. It was incredible. An amazing woman who's out there helping people in New York. I've had her on a couple of times, and her stories, like, I listen to some of these stories, and it's like
Yeah.
pedophiles keep getting their kids. It's like mind-boggling. It's literally, you're like, what?
You really
Even
are creating the community, though,
I wish
that's
I was
so
doing
needed. Yeah.
what I would love is for people to go out there, get the book, comment. There's so many places to comment. Send me an email if you want to be on my show. We'll figure out a time. They are live. You could be in your pajamas because we're not on
Yeah,
video.
it's a podcast,
It's a
not on YouTube,
podcast.
so you're not
Well,
in
there are
video.
podcasts that are videotaped, and I haven't gotten to that
So,
point yet. You have the chance to also help others, and that's what it's a community, like you said.
yeah, I
And
love
I
that.
I really have to, like, last week I saw I had like 95 downloads. Now I don't have what 80 shows or 80 something shows. Uh,
Mhm.
that's a lot for 1 week. So I'm glad people are still out there listening on all the platforms.
So let's transition now to my third question, because I'm really excited to talk about this. It's how you came up with the title and the cover of your book.
The title of my book was simple. I was married to an illusion. And I don't remember if I came up with that idea or part of the idea or you helped me with that one. But, when you're married to a narcissist, you create a persona of what you want in your partner.
And they go along with it at first. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
but they're never what they seem. Like, there were so many personalities, and obviously until my separation, I did not. I might have had ideas here and there, but then I was gaslit and, like, shut up, told like it wasn't worth the fight. But I was right in the end. I mean, I I shouldn't even say I was right in the end. I didn't even know to the extent of how many personalities existed.
Yeah.
So I really had no idea who this monster was. I mean, seriously.
So I'm going to
The
bring up the cover so we can look at it together. And so yeah, I love the title, the tagline. I know that's something I worked on with you just
Mhm,
because we wanted
mhm,
to. We
mhm,
call it a survivor's guide because
mhm,
you survived it. And now
mhm,
you're taking what you learned and helping others. And I think that's really key, that it's a survivor's guide to identifying,
mhm,
because so many people don't even realize they
mhm,
exist or how to know if there's one in their life,
mhm,
and then escaping narcissistic abuse. I love your cover. I think it's so beautiful. It's
mhm.
provocative. You want to talk about that a little
Yes,
bit?
absolutely. Obviously, I wasn't putting myself on the cover, but I wanted the modesty look because that's what my dress looked like. for the
Mhm.
most part. And obviously there couldn't be an actual figure next to me because it was they were an illusion. They didn't really exist. But I wanted people, when they looked at this cover, to be able to see themselves, which is why there's no face.
Right.
I wanted them to be able to say, this looks like a book that I can relate to. Pain, when you look at all the words, everybody that went through an abusive marriage or a narcissistic abusive marriage have heard those horrific words.
Yeah.
And it stays with a lot of people, it stays with them. That's how they feel about themselves. And like I said, when I went into that group therapy, I learned that I wasn't alone, and these people had been through what I went through. I wanted the cover to resonate with those that had been through what I went through, which is why we don't have a face on there. But those words on the illusion were words that were used towards us. So anybody that was abused definitely have heard those words.
I think
And
it's such a great image to reflect those things visually, and it's beautiful. I mean, the flowers on the lap and just the colors, and yet the illusion man beside the bride is, really does carry that ominous feel. I think you have an award-winning cover here, honestly. I really think it needs to be submitted to some,
find me a place. What I want, because I want this book to be read not just for those who have gone through abuse, or when they walk through the book, they're walking with me.
Mhm.
I want it to be for educators, for those that have platforms where they can use a voice for us. It's so important. If you are a leader, you have a voice, you have a platform, it's so important to read this book if you're trying to help others, because this is a topic you have to has to be brought to the forefront from
Yeah.
every angle, every religion, every culture. It's a
Yeah.
pandemic in the entire world.
Well, let me ask you the final question. You have this incredible book that's changing lives, and some of the people watching this show have stories, maybe like yours, or that cover other kinds of hardships or tragedies in life. So, what advice do you have for aspiring authors that may want to be able to write a book that helps others like yours does?
Don't come to your writer, if you're going to have a ghostwriter, with 1,000 pages, or to an editor with 1,000 pages, because you have to choose the most important parts of your story, the ones that are going to be the most relatable, the most educational, the most that are going to keep people wanting to read more. When I gave it to Melanie, she said to me, Bailey, we're not writing an encyclopedia here. You have to cut back. People like short and sweet. I think my book is a little overwhelming, but there are parts where if you choose to read those parts, you're going to walk away learning things. If you want to read my story and know that you're not alone, you'll walk the walk with me. The whole idea of how we set this up was a show and tell book. So you're gonna learn, and you're gonna feel, and you're gonna see what I went through, and you're gonna learn, and back and forth. Take the parts where you can help others get educated, bring awareness, because I'm so tired of hearing stories where people are stuck and they can't get out, or leaders just don't want to get involved. And that's a big, huge topic that we will discuss later down the road. And I mention it in my book, because it's frustrating for me to see that we haven't gotten to that point yet.
So, as far as advising people to write, I think it really came down to the way you organized your book,
Right.
because it is a long book and it covers a lot, but it's approachable.
Yeah.
by dividing it into sections and then dividing the chapters into the storytelling and then the educational side. I think as from the writing standpoint, it was much easier for us to put it together in that way. So advice to people who are trying to tell their stories and write something that might be more on the educational side like yours would be to just pick your story that teaches what the topic is and then talk about the topic and kind of I think that your example to other writers as far as structure is really where your book is so strong.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I could have never ever done it without you. I could have never done it alone. People journal through their journey, um, and that is helpful. That would probably be the easiest way. But again, the structure, knowing what message you want to get out there, showing people it's okay to use your voice. It's okay to leave, and you have to find a support system, and you have to get the help.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the other thing you can really speak to because and you're not hiding it. The term ghostwriter, sometimes people have a ghostwriter and they'll never let people know that they didn't write it, and that's perfectly normal and fine. You've chosen to let that be known, but I think from that what you also give people is permission to say and get help. And in some cases, it might be just have an editor or a friend read what you're writing as you go. And for others who have really hard stories, and just in your case, and this is not uncommon, you had so much information that you're so close to the story. I think it was very hard and will be very hard for some people, a lot of people, to be able to dissect it and pull it apart and say, okay, these are the pieces I should keep that make this book readable. And this is the amount that needs to not be put in. Otherwise, people are just reading another person's horror story and they may have their own horror stories. That's kind of what we talked about a lot, was just to kind
Right.
of say, they're living it. You need to just give them enough so they can identify with you and then teach them. And now it becomes a really useful book. And so I
Right.
think that
And like I said before, we want the audience to be so dynamic, so wide.
right.
We were
Right.
writing for so many genres, so many generations, so
For
many different.
those who are dealing with it, to help prevent it, to educate
Right.
professionals. Like you're right. I mean, and I'm certain that your book will perfectly accomplish its goals in all of those sectors. But it really did take a lot of intention in what we shared and how we shared it. So
Yeah, 100%.
yeah. Well, Bailey, it's always great to hang out with you, and I'm so grateful for the voice that you are, and the warrior that you are, and the amazing book you have, and the amazing podcast. And I'm just really grateful that you came on my show and gave me the opportunity to put a little more spotlight on the things that you're doing.